This week on Africa Weekly, we go to Tanzania, where rats are being used to sniff out explosives and deadly disease. We take you to Senegal, where Japanese volunteers are igniting a passion for baseball. And finally, we take a peek at Nigeria's first ever musical to hit the West End, Wakaa. But first, a summary of the stories that made the headlines this week. US warplanes have carried out the country's first airstrikes on positions of the Islamic State jihadist group in its Libyan stronghold of Sirte, as a response to a request of the Libyan government of national accord. A US senior administration official said that US action would be limited to strikes targeting key IS military infrastructure and information sharing. The fall of Sirte would be a major blow to IS, which has also faced a series of setbacks in Syria and Iraq. South Africans voted in closely contested municipal elections this week that have dealt a heavy blow to the ruling African National Congress Party. By Friday, the party had conceded defeat to the opposition Democratic Alliance in Port Elizabeth, an industrial city that was a key battleground of Wednesday's vote. The results were seen as a marker ahead of the next general election due in 2019, which will include the presidency. A day after a huge pro-government rally in Kinshasa, tens of thousands of Congolese came out in a show of support for the country's opposition leader, Etienne Tshisekedi, who recently returned after spending 2 years in Belgium. Tshisekedi has called for elections to be held this year and demanded that President Joseph Kabila step down in December.
So he should pack his stuff and go.
Opposition protests erupted after the Constitutional Court ruled in May that Kabila could remain in office in a caretaker capacity beyond the end of his current mandate at the end of the year. Riot police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse several hundred protesters in Harare in a fresh outbreak of opposition to President Robert Mugabe. The demonstrators have been defying Mugabe's notoriously ruthless security forces to protest against high unemployment, company closures and government plans to introduce bond notes, which Zimbabweans fear could lead to the hyperinflation that destroyed the economy in 2008 and 2009. Tens of thousands of civilians have been displaced after recent fighting in Juba and Wau in South Sudan. More than 83,000 people are estimated to be displaced in and around Wau following fighting in July between government forces and those loyal to rebel chief Riek Machar. The UN has blamed government troops for ethnically targeted killings and rapes committed during the latest fighting, with over 200 cases of sexual violence recorded in Juba in just 2 weeks. In Tanzania, rats are being trained to sniff out landmines and tuberculosis as part of a project which could one day use rodents to diagnose cancer.
These rats are part of a mine detection training unit in Tanzania, sniffing out the smell of explosives. They're named John Stewart and Stephen Hawking. And like their namesakes, these giant rats are out of the ordinary.
In these boxes we have buried landmines, so the rat has to pass and sniff, and whenever find the smell of TNT over that landmine, he has to scratch strongly and the trainer will click and give a reward.
Every year, landmines kill 15,000 to 20,000 people, most of them children. By deploying these rats, Belgium NGO Apopo has already neutralized more than 80,000 landmines in countries like Angola, Mozambique and Cambodia.
In terms of landmine operation, they are weightless. They have less weight to detonate even live mines. So you can work them in any type of mines without any problem.
In a nearby laboratory, Violet and Oprah are moving from test tube to test tube, sniffing out the smell of tuberculosis. Apopo's fiery force are being deployed to diagnose the disease, which kills more than 1 million people a year.
We increase with an average of 40% over the hospital results. So that gives a good yield of extra positive patients. And by doing so, so far we have already found 10,000 patients which were returned negative by hospitals. And those people, of course, go home, they continue infecting other people. So indirectly, I think we have saved more than 10,000 people.
One rat alone can screen 100 samples in 20 minutes compared to a lab technician who will take 4 days. But despite their successes against both landmines and TB, the Apopo team are sitting back. Their next mission for these rodents to detect cancer.
Rayoma Ogawa arrived in Senegal 6 months ago from Japan. Every day he comes to this makeshift baseball field in Wakaa, a district of Dakar. Armed with bats, leather gloves and balls, he's determined to share his passion for the sport.
Here in Wakaa, there weren't any young people that played baseball. There was some interest in it, but before I came, the kids didn't really know much about it. But then they started to play, and that began to change.
Rayoma is the third Japanese volunteer so far to come and help the Senegalese Baseball Federation, and he's proving a hit with the 10 to 16-year-olds who come to play here.
I knew nothing about the sport before. He taught me everything. It's all thanks to him.
It's different to football, because in football some players don't move at all, but in baseball everyone has to prove themselves.
The volunteers from Japan are a precious resource for Senegal's Baseball Federation, which doesn't get any funding at all, and it's giving them high hopes for the future of the sport.
People in Senegal are very talented, and not just in football. We've shown we can be champions of the world in judo, karate, taekwondo, and I hope that we can get there with baseball too. Maybe not champions of the world, but at least have a good Senegalese team to promote the sport here.
Senegal doesn't yet have a national team, but with efforts underway to get baseball into the 2020 Olympics, these youngsters could still knock it out of the park.
It's a loud, energetic and proudly Nigerian production. Having enjoyed huge success in Lagos last year, Wakaa the musical recently transferred to London, the first Nigerian musical to be performed in the West End. Written and produced by former lawyer Bolanle Austin Peters, her aim is to show that Nigeria has much more to export than just oil.
Wakaa the musical is a political satire and also has a love story in it. What we've tried to do is to use Nigeria's political situation and also a love story to tell, to weave a story around what happens to graduates when they leave school.
For the cast, it's a huge opportunity to perform outside their home nation.
I'm very excited, especially to be playing in West End. That's like the shrine of theatre in London, you know.
Countless rehearsals later, and Wakaa the musical hits London. And with sellout shows almost every night, performing in the British capital has proven groundbreaking.
It will encourage a lot of other artists and plays to come here, knowing that, well, if we can do it, they can do it.
For the cast, it wasn't just important professional exposure, but a key moment for Nigeria's performing arts world.
People back home are really saying, kudos, you are representing us well outside the four walls of our country. And the recipient, the way they received us so far has been positive. So I guess representing Nigeria makes me unrepentantly Nigerian.
Having shown London what Nigeria's theatrical actors can do, the cast are now back in Lagos rehearsing for their next performances, armed with a little British swagger to add to their uniquely Nigerian production.
Next week we'll visit a centre for orphaned girls in South Sudan, which is helping rehabilitate young women in the wake of the recent conflict. That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.